As mentioned, when we preach here at the Independent Reformed Bible Church, we allow for questions. Something might not have been clear. Comments as well. Who has the first question?
So, I am, like I heard you saying, give up.
Is that hot? Can anyone hear?
Yeah.
There we go.
Give it you don't like it that people say we don't hate gay people, but, so I'm thinking, since Mom and Diane, some old neighbors from Douglas Street, people who certainly know our stance. They know who we are, they know what we believe. I was trying to count in my head, there's probably 7 or 8 gay, people we've known for a long time. What should our response be to them? Should we cut them off? Quite frankly, we do wait for them to contact us. We're not pursuing, close personal friendships with them. But they're certainly part of our lives, and if we see them, we don't spurn them.
Sure. So
I guess I'm saying, what does that look like in real life for a Christian who's living in a culture where we have a lot of gay people?
Mm-hmm. And I would have to argue that what it looks like is what it looked like for Paul in Acts 17. Where he spoke and said what had to be done. He let them kick him out. He let them throw him off. See, here's the thing. I would argue right now that what we value so much is the relationship. And I have to say that I believe what the scriptures teach is we keep the relationship going as long as we can keep speaking what needs to be said. The time often comes when they don't want to hear it anymore. At that point, they're the ones that stop the relationship. But what the difficulty is, as R.C. Sproul mentioned, when we speak our convictions, it's interpreted as hate. And that's a real problem. So they don't want to talk to us because they say all we do is hate. We say all we want to do is tell them what the scriptures teach. And what happens, when it talks about the Proverbs 29:29 there, which is a verse, frankly, I'm still working through, because just like the love of God is not as easy as we want to make it. Love God just loves everybody. Well, watch that one. Careful of that one. Also, God's hatred is also a difficult thing to work through as well. It's not so easy as what we want to make it. But here's the thing, when it talks about a wicked man being an abomination to the righteous, what we're talking about is, I think, what Jeremiah faced, which we talked about that just a little bit, and that is anyone who is standing in the way of righteous activity and righteous actions going on should be an outright offense to us. I'll give you a quick example. When I heard Peter Hammond speak about this on a sermon audio this week. And he's talking about the St. James Massacre, in which, and if you don't know about it, in 1994, the church in South Africa was attacked by 4 terrorists armed with grenades, machine guns, and gas bombs. 11 people killed, mothers killed, 58 people wounded, 1 man lived, lost both legs and 1 arm. Someone came to Peter and said, I have to ask the Lord to forgive me. I'm angry. And Peter said, you better ask the Lord to forgive you if you're not angry about this. Because this is something to be angry about. Ultimately, yes, we do have to leave the vengeance to God when we do it. The Bible speaks so much, though, about being angry, about wickedness. And though I don't want to overemphasize it, I feel a huge need to emphasize it because it's not being emphasized anywhere. And the Bible speaks about it again and again. To tell you exactly how to respond to your neighbors is a little bit difficult, but I'll say this. I believe we should talk to anyone as long as they'll talk to us. Again, one of the benefits of standing out on a picket, like we did yesterday by myself, I'm not sure in the future if I want to go with other people or not, or with just a few people, I'm not sure. Because you do get that benefit of talking now. Again, it's not really conversational. It's more yelling, that kind of thing. But at least you can get a little bit back and forth going. And that's what we need to do with people who don't know Christ. We need to talk. They'll reject us. You know what? Paul and Silas, they shook the dust off their feet, and Paul at one point said, since you won't listen to me anymore, now I'm going to the Gentiles. Yes, we have one right here.
So say there was like 100 high officials in Darius, King Darius' kingdom, and obviously from what we read, Daniel was probably rated, number 1 out of 100, so the king obviously wants to set up the whole kingdom. Now, say Daniel was rated like 95 out of 100, do you think that his peers would, kind of set the spot up against him?
No, I don't think so, because the way it says, it says that he was so far above them that Darius, like Joseph, wanted to give the whole thing over to Daniel, and right after that is when the plot is hatched. So if he was like a pretty good guy, I don't think it would have happened. He was too good. Who else has a question? We have one right here.
More of a comment, I guess, as I think through how to respond to people. I think I may have said this before, but the analogy that I come up with myself is if there's a house on fire, your neighbor's house is on fire, and you see the fire on the first floor, and they're sleeping on their second floor. You don't throw a rock or a pebble at the window saying, sorry to wake you up, your house is on fire. You're screaming at the top of your lungs, your house is on fire, you don't get out, you're going to die. I don't believe in fire, sorry. Go away, you're sleeping. Then you barge in the house and you're rescued. So that's the analogy I kind of, for myself, I kind of concluded. That, sometimes you have to go to a different place to try to rescue folks. I don't know if that's helpful.
Well, that particular case, someone's in a burning fire, it's not about their feelings or their attitude towards you. That can be worked out later. We have someone in this room that's alive because someone did that. Right? Where's Dan? Right, Dan? Dan, tell us about that, would you? Just tell us what happened to you.
It was 2006, it was Saturday, and I just got done with working morning shift, and I was the only one in my house. I was sleeping, and the mail lady came in and woke me up, and grabbed me by the well. She woke me up and told me the house was on fire, so I guess I breathed in some smoke. I wasn't myself. So she grabbed me by the hand and yanked me out, and she tried to call 911 on the phone, but I guess the phone lines were already burned. But, so me not being myself, I walked over and sat on the couch and just kind of relaxed and stuff. And I don't know, there was smoke throughout all the room, but I just didn't see it or I wasn't. And I'm not sure where she went then, but another neighbor came in. It was kind of interesting. He was actually the previous owner of the house before my parents bought it, but he came in and grabbed my hand and like yanked me out and ran out through the kitchen. Yeah, they both saved my life. Yeah.
So the house was on fire, your family's all gone, you're the only one in the house, and somebody was not that concerned about your sleep, the sleep you lost last night, or whatever. We had to do one thing, we had to get this guy out of here. No doubt. Well said. Who else has a question or comment? It's John.
Joel, the Proverbs verse you gave us, 29:29, it reminds me of Genesis, where God has put enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. But we also then have what we read in 2 Kings, that the Lord brought about the judgments.
Right, yeah, we read that this morning. Yes.
If you would comment on trying to, it kind of all ties together, but it just seems to be a theme.
Sure, and it's actually said twice in what we read this morning when John read the passage from 2 Kings 24. It actually said twice that God stirred up enemies to his own people because they had turned against him. Now, that doesn't sound like what we want to think about God, that he would do that kind of thing. God would never do that. Well, yeah, he would. He's a great God, and he does what pleases him. And in this case, he used the existing hatred, and all he really did, it says it stirred up. I think what he's really saying is, you know what? He stopped his restraining hand, if you will, from those who would oppress the Israelites or the Jews, and said, you know what? Go ahead and oppress them. I'm going to teach them a lesson, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Everybody's got to learn something by the time this thing is over with. And frankly, they all did, even though it took some time. We have another question over here.
Well, I hope this is not the question that was asked before, about trying to the scriptures. In Leviticus, it talks about, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind, as an abomination. Could you just clarify, is there any significance of an abomination versus
Versus a non-abomination?
Non-abomination.
Abominations versus non-abomination. Bob quoted there Leviticus, which is scorned by, Leviticus to me is interesting. You bring up Leviticus in a secular discussion, and it'll be dismissed by the secularists. The problem is, Leviticus is also dismissed by most of professing Christianity, quite frankly. You've heard me say before, it's the one book that could just drop right out of the Bible, and we wouldn't miss it, right? You know, Genesis, Exodus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth. Leviticus, who even knows what's in there? Well, I mean, it wasn't always that way. Some of you know, for example, I want to get back to the question. Some of you know what verse is on our Liberty Bell, which is probably one of our, besides the Statue of Liberty, I would guess that in this country the most famous symbol that we have is probably our Liberty Bell, besides our Statue of Liberty. And it quotes, of all books, Leviticus. Imagine that. Proclaim liberty throughout the land from Leviticus. Also, Christ asked, greatest commandment, love your neighbors yourself. Not quoting Deuteronomy, not quoting Genesis, not quoting Exodus, not quoting Numbers, quoting Leviticus. So let's embrace Leviticus as Christ did. And we talk about abomination. Abomination is a word that meant a really, really hateful thing. And the word hateful just wasn't strong enough. So he used the word abomination there. And throughout Leviticus, that whole line with man as a woman kind of thing, he often says it's confusion. And one of the things that happened in my discussion with that police officer yesterday, he talked about the confusion that's going on in the inner city. Because now we're seeing men marrying men, and I hate to use the word married, but that's the best way I can say it. Men marrying men and men marrying women, and they don't know any better. And they're completely confused. Why does God say it's a hateful thing? Because God has to say it's a hateful thing if he's going to have any love for his people at all. If you and I love our neighbor at all, we're going to speak up and proclaim that this wickedness is exactly that, and it will destroy everything that it touches. That's why it's an abomination. It's an offense against God, and it's an offense against our neighbor. Everyone right here. Probably time for one more. Yeah, go ahead, Seth. Last one.
Well, I think a lot of it too has to do with another area that we fail as a church, and that is we allow the world to give meaning to words that God has already defined. I'm listening to this whole conversation we're having, and we're batting around this thing of, well, how do we love them? Well, how do we love them? Well, how do we love them? And the problem is that's because are we willing to say, God has defined love as this, conforming one's thoughts, actions, and desires to that of God's. That's love. By the biblical definition, God has determined that to be love. So anything outside of that is not love. What the world calls unloving is actually what God has called true love. To warn one's neighbor of the judgment against them because of their sin is a loving thing. according to God. We're not challenging the world when they say, well, you're not loving me. Yes, actually I am. The only loving thing I can do to my neighbor is to warn them, of God's judgment. So I think even that, we've got to be willing to challenge the world when they try to redefine what God has already defined. That's not theirs to do. God invented language, not them. God has given us words. God has given those words meaning. And we cannot allow ourselves to continually let them take hostage vocabulary and change its meaning. We've obviously talked about how they've done that with the word marriage. So we're all up in arms about that. Why are we not as upset when they redefine what love is? Or what
And hate.
and hate, what truth is, and those types of things. So I think, again, it goes back to that. We must be willing to fight all of these battles. I think it was Martin Luther who said, that the soldier who is, and then I'm paraphrasing his quote, but that basically a soldier who's on the line but not engaged at the point of conflict is pretty much useless. And that's the thing. If we just sit by and say, well, listen, we're soldiers in Christ's army, but I'm not going to engage in this argument about, the word love, well, then we're being useless soldiers.
Thank you. Just one quick thing about that. How do I say this? Yeah, lovingly. Yeah, let's say lovingly. Put it this way. I'll just say it this way. This is an easy way to say it, and a nice way to say it. If Christ would have loved in his day the way they wanted him to love, he would have been alive. They never would have killed him. But he loved his way.